Welcome to Conversations of Hope, shining light on the journey of healing from abuse and trauma. I'm Faith Ingram of Speaking Truth in Love Ministries.
And I'm Michelle Viscuse from Journey Pink. As survivors and advocates, we're here to support, educate, and inspire. Whether you're a survivor of abuse, a friend, family member, or a professional working with survivors, this podcast is for you.
We're breaking the silence that allows abuse to thrive, offering insights for healing and tools for effective support.
Our goal is to create a safe community of understanding, healing, and hope for survivors and their allies.
Visit conversationsofhopepodcast.org for resources and more information. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Hello, everybody. In this episode, we have another guest on our podcast, and her name is Dena Schrock, and she is going to be sharing with us how abuse has affected her and her relationships, and we look forward to you meeting her and hearing her story along with us.
Thank you, Faith and Michelle, for having me on. My name is Dena, as Faith said, and I grew up in the Amish. I'll share a little bit about my background. The very, very strictest Amish called Swartzentruber Amish. And I married in that group, and after a year, almost 2 years of marriage, we left together. Me and my husband at the time had a 13-month-old child. And we got shunned, of course, so therefore left the church, the family, everybody shunned us. And I had another sister that had left before me. I used to say it was the hardest thing I've ever done to leave my family and be shunned from them, not be able to be back and forth the way, we used to be. And I really went through a lot of grief during that time of losing that family aspect of life. But me and my ex-husband, we were born again, and we found so much freedom in the Lord. That's the reason we left, and we just wanted to follow the Lord and do what He wanted us to do. And it caused us to give up our family. I was married with him for 19 years. We raised 4 children. My kids, they're now pretty much grown up. The youngest will be 18. The oldest is 23, and they're all doing very well. I think this doesn't get talked enough, and there's so much shame and guilt around it. It's pornography. It affects so many marriages, and that's something that had affected our marriage, with my husband being addicted to that. And then the breaking point of our divorce was that he sexually abused one of our kids. And therefore, I was forced to make a decision whether I stand by my kids or I choose him and just kind of, shove that under the rug. But took me quite a while to figure out that the best thing for me to do is to go through a divorce and stand by my kids. And it was the right thing to do. I believe it really showed my kids that it's unacceptable, what there's consequences for your actions, and it's not something that we take lightly when there's sexual abuse. The way I grew up, it is taken very lightly in amongst the Amish. I know there's more and more coming out that, they do get consequences more and more than they used to. But growing up, there were no consequences other than they would confess in church, and then, they might get shunned for a couple weeks, and then they would get back into the church and be okay and repeat their abuse. So it was really tough for me to go through divorce, knowing in the back of my mind what all my family thinks. And divorce is strongly forbidden in the Amish. They don't divorce. And no matter what the circumstances, they cannot divorce. And I think there's a place for divorce, that you have to stand up for your kids when there is sexual abuse.
I know that even in Christianity, divorce is frowned upon, and none of us get married thinking that we're going to get divorced. I mean, it's the last thing on our mind when we get married. It's not like, okay, I'm going to get married, and if this doesn't work out, then we can just get divorced and go our separate ways. But most people that end up getting divorced, I don't think that that was their mindset going in. And we don't know the circumstances around people's lives that cause them to make that decision. And a lot of times, people that get divorced are stigmatized, and they don't feel like they fit in church. They feel like people are judging them, and that they are the fifth wheel. And even some churches don't let you do certain things if you're divorced, even if you have grounds for divorce. And like you said, you made the hard decision to divorce your husband to protect your children. And that's a really hard decision to make. And it helps your children to know, hey, my mom is standing up for me, and she thinks that I am worth standing up for. I'm valuable to her. And it does say a lot in a long run. Now, how did your children react to your divorce?
Well, they didn't say much about as far as divorce goes, but then they did say, well, if you get back with him, we will move out. Like, the girls did say that if I would get back with him or allow him back in the house, they would move out. And they were, at the time, they were teenagers. And I must say, going through that, the first year of separation was probably the loneliest road I've traveled. As you said, there's so many people against divorce and so many differences out there that you have to be so careful who you talk to, because they have different viewpoints, and they think that it's not as bad as it could have been, and you guys could work this out, and they come up with their ideas, and they don't see the whole picture of how are the kids doing, how are they feeling. So I had to be very careful who I talked to, and I had a counselor for a whole year, and I had to force my boys to go see their dad every other week. They didn't want to see him either. But I felt like they needed a dad, and I didn't want them to be completely disconnected. So I did force the boys to go see them. The girls I did not, of course. And then I forced the one daughter to go to counseling, and she hated it. She didn't want to go. So it was just a very lonely road. And I just don't think people understand. And you don't understand unless you go through it yourself. But
Right.
I just tried to I survived one day at a time. And my goal was to do what's best for the kids. I just tried to really stick with that.
Conversations of Hope extends beyond this podcast. Michelle and I are available to speak at women's, youth, church, and community events.
We offer presentations on abuse prevention, healing, and empowerment.
To learn more about our speaking engagements and personal coaching and support services, visit our website, conversationsofhopepodcast.org.
Together, we can inspire change and promote healing in your community.
Now, Dena, how did you find out about the abuse? Did one of your daughters come to you, or how did you find out?
My daughter did come to me when I first found out. It had been ongoing before she told me, but as soon as she was able to tell me, she told me. And then he denied it for a week, and then he came to me and confessed that it's true. And that's when I was like, all right, we gotta do something. First, I went to the church, and they didn't think they had to report it, but they recommended we go to a counselor. And I said, for me and my kid's safety, I think he needs to leave the house. And so they agreed that he should probably leave, and just to keep me safe with the law and everything. So he did move out, and we went to counseling, and yes, the counselor had to report it. And that's how the law got involved. Children's Services got involved. The kids were old enough where they did not want Children's Services involved, but of course, anymore it wasn't what the children wanted. It was what's the right thing to do. And then the caseworker, I told her how hard it is for the kids to go through this questionnaire, and they wanted to do a investigation. So the caseworker said that, well, let's see if we can, maybe not take them through the questionnaires and just drop the case. So they did. They went ahead and dropped the case, which was unheard of. But it did keep the kids from going through that traumatic questionnaire.
And it is hard. There are no winners when somebody is abused. Going through the legal system is hard for any victim. Having to testify against your offender is very difficult, especially if you're closely related, because you have so many mixed feelings. You love the person because they're your father, or they're your brother, but you also hate what they've done. And you have so many mixed emotions, and the legal system is not perfect, and it's very difficult to walk into that arena and you never know what is going to happen. And I know victims feel re-victimized a lot of times when they have to go and testify against their offender because the defense attorneys will really question them hard, and it feels like they're being attacked, like they're trying to tear them down. And a lot of victims just they don't think that it's worth it to go through what they have to go through to obtain justice through the justice system. It's very difficult, and
Yeah.
especially on children.
Yeah, that makes sense because my girls said they're fine now. Like, he was out of the house for 2 months by that time where children's services got involved, and then they're like, just as soon as we start getting better, we gotta go through this. They're like, "No, this is not going to happen. We don't want this." They definitely felt that.
I have one question. When you were talking about going to the church, and there are people that in this situation, it's unlike you're going to the church and saying, I have a family member in the hospital, or we have this diagnosis. Like, abuse is a topic that's very difficult. And so in that regard, and sometimes there aren't many people that know about it. So my question for you is, in what ways did you feel like the church was supportive or helpful to you? And in what ways could they be? Like, what are some things that would have been helpful? And the reason I'm asking that is because when we know this happens in churches, we know this happens to families that are in churches. But again, because of the nature of the topic, a lot of times either people don't know that there's an issue going on and that you might need support or help, or it's such a topic that people are shied away from and they don't know how to help. What can I do? I can't get in the middle of that, right? Like, that's some of the things. So I'm just wondering, were there things that were helpful that they did to support you, and what things could be done? So if there's a family or a person out there in a church that knows another family is going through this, how can they offer help? How can they offer support? What would be beneficial?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think what the church did do that was helpful, they told my ex that he is not welcome to come to that church anymore because they want to keep it safe and comfortable for me and the kids. So that was really good. I felt supported in that way, that they do have my best interest at heart. What else they could have done? I would say followed up with me on, and not, I did have one person from the church that I would kind of keep in the loop of the children's services, and in that way, I would say a thing that I would have really appreciated would have been, do you need help with just someone to be by your side? Do you just like, do you ever feel like too alone? Do you want someone to be with you at the house, or do you want to go out to eat sometime? It's such a lonely place to be when you don't have anyone. I'd say just try to have someone kind of walk with you. Like, if I would have had someone from church that would have been just walking with me through it, that is what I would have wanted.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's a practical thing that a lot of us don't even think about. You know, when somebody's going through a divorce, or when they find out that one of their children has been abused. And even if it was abuse by somebody outside of the family, it still is very difficult to walk through that by yourself. Just to know that somebody's there that you can talk to and spend time with, even play games with, even do normal life things so that you're not just feeling like you're struggling all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe to offer that for your kids too, something for them, just to give them like a night at the movies, something.
Right. It's like they lost their dad. I lost my husband. And yet we just didn't have anyone to like go do stuff with or just someone to walk with us.
And especially in your case, because you lost the majority of your family members when you left the Amish church. So you didn't have that to fall back on either. And instead, they're even shying away from you even more because now you've done the unthinkable by getting a divorce. So they're like pushing you further and further away. So you feel even more and more isolated, where a lot of people that are not from an Amish background, they may be able to go back to their parents or their siblings and kind of, have them as a support as well. But you instead had an even greater alienation. So it's almost like you've lost your family, now you've lost your husband, and you feel really, really isolated.
Yeah, very true. Because me and my husband went through all that losing family together. And then when I lost him, it was just another huge loss.
We're coming up to the end of our time for our episode today, but we're going to continue our conversation with Dena and air part 2 of this conversation in next week's episode, so be sure to join us. We hope this episode of Conversations of Hope has been a source of comfort and inspiration.
Remember, you are not alone on this journey of healing.
Visit conversationsofhopepodcast.org for more resources and information.
Please subscribe or follow and share with those who might need this message of hope. Until next time, keep hope alive.